This is a great event. Thank you. Glad I didn't have to say, please hold the applause. Bob Ackerman I encrypted this, and I was going to explain who all the panelists are, but Bob Ackerman has my public key. Where did Bob go? Where is he? All right, I'll figure out the encoding. Anyway, I'm Gary Malewski. I'm the CEO of Cyber Defense Media Group, and we have cyberdefensemagazine.com. We've been in business for 7 years. We're heading to 2 million readers. It's free, cyberdefensemagazine.com, so grab it, it's free. Cyber Defense TV, Cyber Defense Awards. You're going to hear about some startups that get awards with us, and it's great. And then we also have Cyber Defense Radio and TV. Check us out. It's all free. So there are 3,000 cybersecurity companies in the world. And every day we talk about, is it AI, is it machine learning, is it this or that? I think one of the biggest problems starts with people, right? So we're going to talk about the human firewall, and let me introduce our esteemed panelists and work our way through some great questions that they helped me put together, tough ones, because I always change the questions on them at the end, before we start the panel. Okay, so we'll start at the end. Samuel Visner, am I pronouncing right, Sam?
Yep, you got it.
Samuel Visner, Director of National Cybersecurity, federally funded Research Development Center at the MITRE Corporation. Okay, that's Sam. Okay, Sam is a former chief of signals intelligence programs at the NSA and has led several cybersecurity businesses. Please turn off your phones now and remove your batteries. Okay, next. Okay, now they think I'm joking, Sam. Okay, we're recording everything. He's not. Naftali Geffen, thank you, Naftali. Did you come all the way from Israel for this?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Naftali is the CISO of Amdocs, came all the way from Israel. Amdocs has, I think, a small group of employees, about 27,000. He's the Chief Information Security Officer of a company with 27,000 employees. If there's a question we can ask someone who deals with every possible attack and breach, that's the man to ask about today. Now, Naftali is a leading provider at his company of protecting networks that make solutions for media digital services for the digital transformation. If you're in the telco space, you'll know Amdocs. They've been around forever. They started out managing payroll for all the cell phone providers and the cable companies, and then they just grew and grew and grew. It's an amazing company, and we're going to learn more about Naftali. He's an expert of all things cyber defense, a breach prevention expert. Next, one of my favorite cyber superheroes who brought his comics today. Able to leap small buildings in a single bound. Gary Berman, he's the CEO of Cyberman Security and refers to himself as the most reluctant cybersecurity person in the world. You're not going to meet him anywhere else than at the Cyber Investing Summit. Okay, Gary has a 25-year career in marketing and helping companies get a brand and message. Has anyone heard of Zumba? Am I right? Zumba? Mm-hmm. He helped put them on the map. Now, Gary was breached. He is a victim turned hero. So this is a really cool panel. We have someone who might have to eavesdrop on all of us and know how to break into any network. We have someone who has to block that. And we have someone who's been victimized by that. Okay, that's our panel. Now, let me set the stage. Every couple weeks, what do we hear about in the news? A breach. Raise your hand if you think you've been victimized in a cyber attack. Okay, everyone should raise their hand. Come on, be honest. Let me test the audience. Okay, if you had your coffee, you will have an answer to this. How many records have been lost or stolen by cyber criminals since the 2005 Choice Point breach in America? How many records have been lost or stolen? Anyone have a guess? There's prizes. Come on, somebody raise their hand. 1 million records? 5 billion?
2 trillion.
2 trillion, I like that. Not yet, that's my future speak. 11.5 billion records. How many people live in America? Oh, you live in America. Yeah, no, 330. Me too. So we've all been victimized 4 times. 330 million of us live in this country, and we've all been victimized about 4 times if I'm doing my math right. So this panel is going to help us on how do we deal with it. I think on investing, this is an open green field, so I want to share some stats. Gartner projects that global cyber spending in 2019, I think that's this year, is going to exceed $124 billion, a 9% growth from last year. These are good numbers. And by the way, this is the best event to network and fill your pocket with business cards of venture capitalists. If you're a startup, go meet the VCs. They're all hanging around. and meet some of these folks. This is the best event to really network. I love this event. So we're going to network, and we're going to make money, and we're going to solve problems together. Let me give you more. An Accenture survey found that 4,600 companies with over $1 billion in annual revenue, 2/3 of the CEO and the board of directors now have direct oversight of, guess what? The cybersecurity program. And folks like Naftali, I think, do you sit on the board? Or do you have access to the board?
I have access to the board and board meetings. They're very interested in what's happening in cyber today. So it's a big change.
Finally, the board is interested. Do we have everybody mic'd up? Their mics are on? Okay, here we go. First question. And I really want to get the audience involved, so you'll have a chance to ask questions. But let's start with, it's a really good question. One of our panelists was victimized by an insider threat. Can anyone remember who that was? Cyberman, Gary. All right. So Gary, what did you learn from this experience, and what can you share with the audience?
Well, first of all, I really want to thank Lindsay and the Cyber Investing Summit for having me. Thank you very much. One of the challenges of conferences of any type, especially something like this, is victims seldom speak up. And the reason they don't speak up is because of reputational risk. In my case, I was ashamed, I was ignorant. It went on for a long period of time, and these were trusted insiders who got together when I was injured and out of my own company. They essentially cloned my company. All the branding, all the technology. When phone calls came to my company, they were redirected to their shadow company. There were 19 attack vectors. There were 36 people listening to my every conversation in my OnStar account, in my car. It was an incredibly, rather unbelievable, improbable story. And so one of the big things I learned, after losing several $1 million about this is it feels good to talk about it. And being a victim is exhausting. And so I decided to pivot, and to become an advocate to help keep people safe while online at work or at home at school. The problem was I had no idea what I was talking about because the stuff you do is way too complicated for probably 99.9% of all people on Earth. They don't get it. And the reason I knew that is because I got a book called Cybersecurity for Dummies. And have you ever seen the Dummy series of books? They're yellow with a black thing on it. Anybody ever seen those books? So I figured, okay, Cybersecurity for Dummies, perfect. I get it, 10 pages in, I was lost. I mean, I'm telling you. So rather than giving up, I found the author, a really great guy from Palo Alto Networks, and I told him that story, and he busted out laughing. Like crying, laughing. I said, why are you laughing? He says, well, it's not really for beginners. Then why do you call it Cybersecurity for Dummies? And that's when I knew there had to be a better way to distill complicated cybersecurity and technology information into something that people can relate to, that they can understand, that, and if we're lucky, captures their heart and their imagination. So I won't go into too much of this now, but we created a superhero comic series, and it's gone crazy. And the last thing I'll say that I learned about this is the only time you hear about hacking or cybersecurity is when the black hats win. What about all of the people, all of you, who toil in anonymity to keep everybody safe in these thankless jobs that are high stressful, and relentless, and you never can win? Best you can do is tread water, and I want to change that. So I put a conceptual comic cover on my LinkedIn page, which I never used LinkedIn before, and I asked the cybersecurity community, CSOs and CISOs, to please send me real-life blinded stories of cybercrime, answering what happened, what were the consequences, and most importantly, what were the lessons learned for possible inclusion into comics and things like that. As of this morning, I have 21,855 connections with the most important people in the cybersecurity world. Across big companies, little companies, academia, Department of Homeland. We had a guy with DHS, and we had our first Cyber Heroes meeting. We're like unleashing these unsung heroes. We had our first meeting yesterday with about 10 or so people. DHS, and it's nuts. The people that have been kind enough to help and who do this on an ongoing basis. So that's just the tip of the iceberg.
So Gary's talking about the human factor in cyber. So he had an insider threat. Sam, is the insider threat the most risk? And Naftali, we'll go Sam and Naftali. Is it insider threat? Is it external threat? What's the biggest form of risk that we face today? We're sitting with a victim who had a form of insider threat. What are your thoughts?
Gary, it's a great question. And of course, since I'm from Washington, we're all trained to thank you for the question and then go off and answer whatever question we wanted to. You'll notice at the end, by the way,
Start doing that, I'm doing my Clinton impression.
by the way, the other thing I'm going to do is then ask you if I've answered your question, and you'll be polite and tell me that.
Thank you,
that
you
I
did a
have.
great job. Next.
But here's the way I look at it. The insider threat is important, but it's only one of a number of threats. Look, we're dealing with nation-state actors. For them, the insider threat is in many cases simply part of what they do. Nation-state actors don't look at cyberspace as an electromagnetic environment. They look at it as sovereign space that they can conquer and control, including your cyberspace around your power plant or your bank or your hospital, that they can conquer, make sovereign to them, and that they can control. And to them, and I think my Israeli colleagues here would recognize this, and to them, insider threat, superb target reconnaissance, whatever it is they're going to do, are all part of the attack. The insider threat is opportunistic, it's particularly dangerous, it's particularly pernicious. But the threat isn't the insider. The threat is the insider. The threat is whoever is manipulating them. And what we're seeing today is a confluence of events. More complex IT infrastructures we have to support, more cybersecurity technologies that we can deploy, a threat that's both technically more sophisticated and more sophisticated in terms of the tradecraft, how it's operated. Look at how the Russians intervened in Brexit, how they attempted to intervene in the U.S. election. That was operationally very sophisticated. We're also looking at new requirements. Boy, I'm glad we put the audience to sleep, right? The lights went out. New requirements that have to be met. And lastly, the rising value of information. So when you take a look at the threat, you're looking at nation-state actors and criminal actors who say, well, what do I know about this? Let me do some target reconnaissance. Let me become persistent in there. Let me see if there's somebody who has administrative privileges that are elevated that I can suborn. So we need, while we're focused on the insider threat, we need to focus on the totality of the enterprise that is attempting to exploit us, to steal our information, to undermine its integrity and its availability.
Great answer. So let's pause for a second for Naftali. Naftali, do you assume you've been breached all the time? I mean, Gary never assumed he was breached till he found out about it later.
Well, the working assumption of a company this size is always that there are attempts to breach the company, and some of them even, I would say, successful attempts. But I think the main issue is combining the two answers that we heard before. The technology platform that we use is focused around protecting from external, as you said, countries or others that have the power, which is more technology power. But internally, we do a lot of investments on what we call the awareness aspects of people, because usually the way to, I'll give you a good example, a very good trick to have a penetration test successful is just walking around and throwing a few discount keys on the floor, or sending emails with an attachment, say salaries or stuff. So the first way to get into an organization usually will be using the humanity nature, our nature, that we'll always be happy to do things that we should not do. So it's a combination of those two. So technically wise, on the technology level, we're protecting for what is more sophisticated offenses, and we use each technology that we can to protect of those technology threats. But usually the way to actually exercise those threats is based on human behavior. And if you have a company of about almost 30,000 people, the chances that someone is going to try to open the door using one of those employees. So we actually focus on two aspects, technology-wise, on the real threats, which are the technology threats, and on the human side of it, by doing awareness campaigns and drills. We have about 80 drills a year just on awareness campaigns, phishing attempts, just to make sure that if and when a technology breach will happen, so we will block it on the human surface of it before.
Did everyone hear Naftali say, you know, he's probably bought every firewall in the book, and AI this, and machine learning that, and all the greatest tools, but if he sends out an email to the right group of people or randomly to his company that says salary, you know, employee salaries attached, what, do you know what the percentage of opens are? Is it 95%, even after you've trained them not to be phished?
Well, our rate now is much lower. It's about 12 to 9% of phishing, because everyone knows in the company that the phishing is happening. So people today in the company know that if you have in August a great deal of flights, or if someone sends something about salaries, or so they have this sort of internal, I would say, organizational behavior to be aware of it might be a phishing attempt. So the most, I would say, straightforward phishing attempts will be caught by the relevant technologies that we have, but also by those phishing drills that we make almost every week. We had about 80 phishing drills in a week.
You guys hear that almost every week he's doing drills.
Yes.
So anyone here from England or visit England? Anybody? Hello. Hello from over the pond. So what's really cool is you get to London. It's really cool. You get to London. I'm from New England. So anyway, our buildings aren't as old. You get to Old England, and they're worried about fires all the time. You're in your hotel, and you're ready to go to sleep, and there's a fire drill, and you have to leave the building. And the doors double lock, and you notice this? They had, a great fire in London in the, 1800s or 1900s? And 1600s, and since then, they got so afraid of a fire that they've prepared everyone. I mean, you will never have a fire in London without knowing what to do, right? So this preparedness, this human factor, this constant vigilance sounds to me like it's the right approach, right? Being a little paranoid. I mean, Israel's attacked all the time. I've learned that a lot of the hot investments come from Israel because Israelis are always worried about an attack, right? So for example, Dave DeWalt, if you remember he was a keynote here, Dave said, I'm investing in drone technology, stopping drones from attacking stadiums. And who invented a way to stop them first? An Israeli company, right? Because they're worried about drone attacks. You just put a bomb or some bioweapon or whatever, and you fly the drone, and away you go. So we really have to be prepared for things we don't expect, and we have to expect that we're being breached, is what we're hearing from the panel. So let's keep going on that. Here's a good one. Sam, what are the biggest issues today? I mean, we've talked, and we've heard other panelists talk about investing in critical infrastructure security, better training from the last panel, dumbing down the use of encryption, right? I mean, Bob took off with my keys, so this is hard to do. Post-quantum, right? So our panelists were here an hour ago, but you didn't see them because it's quantum physics or something. Okay, dumb jokes. Sam, you got securing 5G, you got critical infrastructure, you got securing AI, you got autonomous vehicles, Internet of Everything, securing elections, social media. What do we do?
Well, we can run and hide, but fortunately, unfortunately, that's not an option that's available to us. We're about to undertake an entirely new IT infrastructure that we have to secure. We're going to have 5G around the world, which means that we're going to lose our intermediate networks and we're going to connect directly to our carriers. We're going to have complex infrastructures that AI will mediate. We're going to have IP version 6, which will give us an internet address for anything that we want to connect. We're going to have tens of thousands of low Earth orbiting satellites providing ubiquitous global connectivity. So we're going to change the IT infrastructure that we have to secure. And one of the big challenges that I think we face is that we've done an excellent job of creating cybersecurity products to secure the IT infrastructure of 2014. But the IT infrastructure of 2021 is going to look fundamentally different, and I don't know that we're ready for it. Investors have to figure out which are the technologies in which to invest. That's you all, presumably. And consumers, the companies and enterprises that need to protect themselves, have to figure out which are the technologies that they want to buy. And hopefully, those two sets will align correctly. What my team has been doing, and actually the team from MITRE is here, Mary Raguso, Mary Wang, and Ann Townsend are back there. So yeah, Mary Wang, they're back there. What they've been doing is building up architectures of products that are interoperable, that work together, that can be overlaid on an energy infrastructure, a banking infrastructure, a healthcare infrastructure, whatever is the infrastructure that needs to be protected, with an eye towards how to protect these infrastructures as they make the transition to the new environment that I just described. And I think that's the path that has to go forward. And if I could get my wish, and maybe at some point I will, both third-party analysts and the companies making the investment, as they say, what do I want to invest in, what do I want to recommend? The answer is it would be products that are interoperable, work with each other, are modular, and are going to be fit for purpose for this new IT environment that we're about to create. And we are creating it very quickly. People who think about when 5G happens, by the time they think about it, they're going to see it in their rearview mirror.
Would you say inbuilt encryption in all this stuff?
Inbuilt encryption is important. It's something that ought to be done. I agree. I think it was Dov who was saying earlier that we're simply not making enough use of it. That's one of the things that we ought to be doing. But there are other things that we can be doing. For example, zero trust networks, which gives us the ability to validate and to build trust chains at each step of the way in the process. There's good work happening there. The government, which I think might have been unfairly maligned a little earlier, though I don't work for them anymore, is actually moving out and pressing very hard on building essentially those kinds of zero trust network architectures.
I've seen the old version, Maxwell Smart, the cone of silence.
Absolutely, and it worked incredibly well. So those are those are things that I think are trying to do, and the comments that I'm trying to make here are trying to vector people towards what are the investments that we're going to need to make, and how are the architectures going to be developed.
So would Gary and Naftali, would you agree? We're hearing encryption, getting interoperability, but I think you've been victimized at the people level. You're constantly training people. Are we not investing, both of you take turns, are we not investing right in people?
Okay.
Let's start now.
I think there is a need for tremendous reallocation of resources in this ecosystem as an outside observer, because of the top 500 cybersecurity firms by revenue, only 3% or 16 offer people-centric kinds of things, education and training. The remaining 97% have black boxes, of which are not differentiatable at all to most people. And so that's number one, a complete switch on how this industry works. The second thing about it is, because of the nature of the people in this ecosystem, which are all technology people, 93% of the people in the cybersecurity world come from tech backgrounds. That makes a lot of sense in the world, but there's going to be this ridiculous talent shortage and a pipeline that needs to be filled fast globally. This is one of the things we're working on with our comics. And I think the third thing I would say about that is the notion of critical infrastructure that Sam talked about. So our particular strategy, even though we're using a comic, we're doing 16 editions of the graphic novels and creating a platform focused across the DHS critical infrastructure sectors. So the next version that we're going to be releasing in a few weeks is about Wall Street. It's called Defending Your Money. The Cyber Hero Adventure is Defending Your Money. And we need to teach people about that stuff and how crooks, bad guys monetize it. And we created this cool thing where the evil characters have a digital lasso around the bull in front of, Wall Street here, pulling them down to the dark web, and fighting those battles. So there are different ways to communicate about this stuff, which is the last thing I would say, is that you need more marketing communications people. You need, the softer kinds of skills, the less empirically based sorts of skills. And one of the most interesting things, one of the great people that I've met is Anita D'Amico. She and her company created this platform called Comic B. And Comic B is basically a comic creation platform tied to the NICE framework, which is the National Institute of Cybersecurity Education, which, by the way, in about a month, they've just agreed to put their seal of approval on the front of our comic and send it to 200,000 federal employees. Round of applause for those guys. I mean, for real. No, I mean, okay, that you're not employing is endemic of why this industry can benefit from change. Because what I'm telling you is what's next. You could spend everything on artificial intelligence and all these amazing solutions, and you need to, but you can't forget people.
That's a great answer. So it's about people. Anyone in the room ever want to be a superhero when they were a kid? Be honest. We all did. Come on. We all, what's the biggest grossing movies? The biggest grossing movies? What one just outdid Titanic? Endgame, right? Did you watch Endgame? Come on, don't spoil it. So what Gary's saying is that the people angle is important. I call it the human firewall. None of us have turned on the human firewall at 100%. In fact, most companies have it down at 10%. Naftali has it way up there at 99.999%. How did you do it? Tell us what you're doing with people. I mean, you already said you do 80 things, but how do you get them to enjoy it? I mean, isn't there this retention a month later, you send them this, you just won the Israeli lottery, or, and then they click. I mean, how do you get them excited and enjoying learning about cyber if they're in HR, or they're in finance, or they're in some other department?
So I'll come back to your question, as I've learned from my colleagues, the people say in Washington, and everyone can look outside. We're sharing our virtual reality experience. We're not selling anything. We're not a vendor selling anything on cyber. So we actually moved the awareness activity rather than dumb movies or other things to a virtual reality environment which each employee go through unit by unit. So that's making it a bit more close to the world of taking care of the human part of it, because you have to always be innovative to make people play the game, be part of the game.
What do you do in virtual? So he's got virtual reality
Everyone can go out and see outside.
And you can play with
it. They can play around.
What are you doing in VR?
We train them.
How do you train? Like, this is a phishing attack?
No, we use real scenarios, and we have various versions for the development team developing on cloud, and different versions for people on the marketing, and different versions for finance people that get emails to transfer this amount to that amount. So we play around with the different content. It's not one content fits all. So it's a constantly work of adapting and adjusting the activity.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
What else?
What else? Another thing is, and mentioning all the technologies, so I give you an example. For ransomware, we hold in our company 6 different technologies, going all the way from EDR to network behavior to server-based other activities, and a whole process of backups to make sure that we are ready for a ransomware attack. But above all those various technologies, it doesn't really matter which technology we implement. As a CISO point of view, I have one question is, how quick will I know if and when there is a ransomware attack? How quick am I going to contain it? And how quick am I going to start using the incident response process internally to contain it and actually block it?
Now, the FBI says pay the fee. You don't pay them.
Well, you can see if you look at numbers that there's a very big decrease in numbers of ransomware for private people PCs, but on enterprise level it has a 12% raise, and on mobile 30% raise. It's something that you as a company have a problem paying. I don't want to mention companies that did pay, but sometimes it gets out of the news, and it's not a very good news item that a company paid for ransomware. So in this case, it's not just the relevant technologies that we put in place to stop an attack. It's a whole, what we call in our company, a cyber readiness program, which has to do with the people that if and when there is an attack on different levels, starting with the SOC team, incident response team, and going all the way to the board members, if and when, they should be activated according to the various scenarios. So again, it's not just investing in the technologies, and we have lots of technologies. We do lots of penetration testing. So we have 30 people doing penetration tests all around. So it's not just the technology and the various technologies, we have them all. It's taking those technologies, trying to combine them to a specific threat vector, and make sure that we as a company, which means also people and stakeholders, act accordingly or protect ourselves accordingly, depends on the various threat vector. So it's combining the two. So we do invest on 5G, we invest on cloud, on container security. We're doing it on a regular basis. But it's one layer above, which is missing, and looking on investments, is taking all those endless technologies, shifting to the new landscape of cloud and microservices and containers, developing in containers. Look, we have about a few thousand developers that move from standard development to developing in containers. So it's not just the technically manners that we do to protect the containers, but it's the way you have to train those programmers that use open source, that use third-party open source components in your product. So it's a whole mindset of training those people, not just putting the controls in place.
This is
So
great.
it's combining both.
So he's not a VC, but I'm hearing something that the VC said. They are investing in smart or secure coding tools. Did you guys hear that in the last panel? So White Hat Sec was recently acquired by NTT Security. Do you use White Hat Sec or someone like them?
We use some companies of this sort. We use companies for...
White Source from Israel? Come on.
We have
won't
many
say.
companies, some of like checkmarks for static code analysis,
Okay.
and we have other ones for dynamic code analysis, and we have some others for container security, and we have a whole process of security, SDLC, security development lifecycle.
Very cool.
So it's combining the technology and the training to the developers to make sure that the next products on the application level are developed in a secure way.
So Naftali's saying SDLC. It's not software development lifecycle. It's security development lifecycle. Yeah. So
Can I add one quick
Sure,
point?
go ahead.
So as I listened, to ransomware, the first time that I learned about it was a few years ago when the United Kingdom healthcare system was hacked, and then it went viral and stuff. So we started thinking about, wow, I mean, it just went in the wild, and look at the damage it just did, from one relatively modest attack and everything. So how do you, again, educate people? So, I'll show you. We created a character called Wilbur WannaCry. And because you may know from the hack, was called WannaCry. And one of the things that's amazing about your world is it turns out it's like this very serious and deadly video game. You know, the people in your world like superheroes, they play video games, you know, they make names like WannaCry, you know, or the, you know,
Which took down the NHS, if everyone knows. And in England, kids couldn't get their operation for 3 days because a piece of ransomware, in my mind, was actually an intranet denial of service attack, taking down 1,400 computers at a healthcare system. That's a bad piece of virus there.
Yeah, no doubt. You know, and coincidentally, our next edition after that we're releasing in August in partnership with DEF CON in Las Vegas is Defending Your Health. And the reason for that is it's obvious. It's 20-something% of the economy. It's literally life or death. All these digital medical devices are incredibly vulnerable. You know, I've heard from the smartest people in the world on this stuff, including the Mayo Clinic, you know, last week about all, you know, these things. It's a serious matter, and earlier we saw some examples of healthcare. So I mean, that's a big one.
So let me do this, because I know you folks might want to get some questions in. Let me ask Sam. We'll start with Sam. Let's just pretend you're one of the folks from the last panel. You're a venture capitalist, you're managing $1 billion fund. What's the next cybersecurity investment you're going to make, Sam?
Well, good question. First thing I would say is we certainly spend a lot of time admiring this problem. That, by the way, is a Washington phrase, although you've probably heard it. We admire this problem. People created the IT systems that are vulnerable. People are in charge. People are creating the exploits and attacks against them, and people can fix this problem. The ransomware problem is a very difficult problem because, in part, it's lucrative, right? There are many enterprises that don't protect themselves very well, and the value of their information is more important. In many enterprises, what did Michael Porter say? Information intensity is the new measure of enterprise value. How much information to what extent is the company's value proposition essentially the same? Essentially overlays, it's completely aligned with their information. They don't exist apart from it. In fact, that's their product in many cases. So in this world, ransomware in particular is very lucrative. If you can undermine someone's integrity, their assurance that the information is good, or take it away from them, or encrypt it such that they can't get to it, or damage it in some way, you can make them pay a lot of money. But that's a problem that actually can be solved. We're doing work on it. We have a whole project in data integrity, and it's on the web. It shows you what kinds of products you can put together such that you can do a much better job. And I'm certain that Naftali and his people are to immunize yourself to make sure it doesn't happen. And if it does happen, so that you don't have to pay the ransom, that you can recover your data. So that's an issue that I think can be addressed, and I think the products and architectures available to be able to address it are now coming to market, and they're worth using.
Would you invest in continuous data protection?
I would invest in continuous data protection, and I would invest in anything that is interoperable, that has a good architecture, that gives you continuous awareness of the state of security throughout your enterprise. Many organizations have found it fairly difficult to be able to bring together a unified picture of the state of all of their applications, all of their enterprise security, whether or not it's intrusion detection or intrusion protection, or the use of some kind of governance risk and monitoring. One thing I really do think we ought to do is a much better job of building up a unified picture so that operators can use it. And one last point, though you didn't ask this question, you inferred it. This awareness has to exist at the C-suite level. If I were doing nothing else, I would tell the C-suite, this is not something you assign to a CISO and say, I have this problem covered. Since the value of my enterprise is in fact largely a function of the value of my information, no one in the C-suite should be allowed to escape responsibility from understanding that they have a role to play in making the investment, in overseeing the investment, in testing to be sure that the investment is being used, and in knowing what their role is in case there is a breach or something should happen. And I think that that's something that doesn't happen frequently enough, and that's why the question of whether or not Naftali had access to the C-suite, that's the right answer. And the question is, does the C-suite actually have a role and know what their role is? And if they do, that's something that's worth doing, and that's an investment to make.
Okay, so I hear CDP and C-suite for dummies that actually works. 30 seconds each. You get the VC hack, because I want to get some Q&A audience. Naftali, 30 seconds. You've got $1 billion. You're a VC. What do you invest in cybersecurity?
First of all, I would invest in having, following what Sam said, the same on the application level security. There are various solutions. The whole life cycle of development moved to a different way. On the application level, we're in the same place as we used to be in the networking level in the beginning of one firewall, and it took time to develop to a whole set of tools for different things. So application security is definitely a place which needs a solution, but a more holistic solution rather than various segmented solution. And the other side, the other one is what I call the cyber readiness approach, having this visibility to consolidate those endless technologies, which always evolve again and again, to a place that can give a CISO or the board, as you said, a very simple answer to, am I attacked? How quick can I know I'm attacked? To contain it and actually to react accordingly. So we have various technologies. Some, there is a time to consolidate it, but not finding the one technology because it will never be there. It's a different approach to consolidate the investments done to a place that can give a CISO a practical answer to the most basic question. Am I attacked? Yes, no. What should I do?
Sounds great. So we've got CDP, we've got board level stuff, maybe investing in getting boards involved in this better training. And you talked about a holistic approach to app security. 30 seconds. Gary, what are you investing in with your $1 billion?
The Cyber Adventures Defenders of the Digital Universe.
He's looking for funding.
No, I'm really not. By the way, we don't sell anything. We're vendors. I donate everything. Haven't made a penny in 2.5 years. If we're lucky, some company like, Microsoft or AT&T or, the government or something like that will help us out. That will be good. But, to me, it's all about a rising tide lifts all ships. And one of the things that I've learned, from these thousands of people in your world that I listen to, all the time, is there's a lot of knowledge just sitting there. So I would invest in a platform, and this happens to be something I'm working on, but I would invest in a platform for knowledge sharing. And there are those, of course, across the vectors. But one of the things I've learned is that the black hatters are always sharing. I've been on the dark web many times. They're always sharing. There's a Yelp marketplace for cocaine and murder. I mean, it's nuts. But in the good guy section or the white hat section, you're very vertical. You're very siloed, and because these are your intellectual properties, you want to keep things to yourself, plus or minus, because that's how you make your money. And I get that, but to solve the big things like Sam is talking about, you're going to need, the idea that a rising tide lifts all ships, and you have to share information much more freely, although I understand it's getting better.
Great answer. So we're hearing share information at the people level. We're just about out of time. Do we have any questions for our panelists? All questions are good. Anybody? Go ahead, sir.
I do a lot of work in the cloud using tools from Microsoft Office 365. Are there vulnerabilities that I'm not aware of that using a publicly available thing like Microsoft in the cloud might be creating for me?
Question is to whom?
Naftali, right?
I'm not going to refer specifically to the Office 365 in Azure, but I can say that usually an enterprise has more than one cloud platform. It has Amazon, Microsoft. So the Office 365 is something that you use internally for the corporate, but the development life cycle has nothing to do with a software which is part of Azure in this case. So I think a main takeaway that I have with experience with all the cloud vendors is they do a great job protecting your data on their premises, but they're not so much concerned of your premises being attacked by someone using their cloud. So, and it's definitely fine. That's not their job. So putting things on cloud, by definition, it's a world that you have to, I would say, rely on the security measurements that the cloud vendors do, but never forget that they protect your assets on their cloud. Once you're connected to cloud or many clouds, it's none of their business to protect your assets on your enterprise because no one moves everything to cloud. So it's
I
just...
appreciate that. I'm just always worried that some evil person at Microsoft will find a way to get me.
One more question, because I know Lindsay's on her way down.
Gary, you stole the professor from me later on. He was supposed to go to panel height, Mr. Guthrie. You had the greatest conversation, and it was just a question I just had to ask because the people here are investing. Mr. Guthrie, professor, what's your opinion on AI? Because all I hear is a lot of bullshit about it. Because I deal with all those security companies. Can you give the academic description, because I don't know if you go through experience of Watson and artificial intelligence. How is that translating to AI? What's the definition of it? And where do you see the investment forecast for AI?
30 seconds?
I know, this is a 5-minute answer.
Oh, wow. I'll try to make it a 30-second answer.
And then maybe you guys can talk after.
Okay, so first of all, AI is used very strongly as a marketing buzz. I've seen companies coming to me as a CISO talking about AI. I've been in the AI industry for a few years. So they just use the term, but not even explaining what the term is all about. So it's just a whole bunch of, I don't want to say what it is. Nothing to do with the specific world of security. But on the other side, there are many topics specifically around machine learning and what's called natural language querying. Around one of the topics you mentioned is data protection. So one of the challenges is around the data itself, not about the attack vectors, which are very structured and there's nothing to do with AI now. I can't think of anyone who will rely on an automated system to protect him against of an attack based on AI. Because, again, trying in 30 seconds, you have the supervised AI and you have the non-supervised AI. The supervised AI, you need a lot of talent to learn those algorithmics and keep them up and live. And this is something which you need a lot of human resources and a lot of expertise. And again, to be in a place that you can actually, account of it, it's still far from the cybersecurity world. But if you needed to digest the endless data sets you have in an organization, and if it's an unstructured data, so this is a good place where you can use AI technologies to map the data, to classify the data, and to try to find some anomalies on the data behavior. But to make the decision, it's still a human decision, and not to do with the.
No tools in cybersecurity that have functioning AI.
I say we have, but those that are specifically on the world of data, and it has nothing to do with the nature of the security part of it, because security activities are done to get some data. So on the data sets, we do have. On the protective life cycle, and protective itself, on the cyber niche of it, I think most of the technologies today are the standard technologies which are not based on unsupervised learning, but on a very straightforward algorithm, which is all to do with abnormality detection, etc., which is not to do with self-learning algorithms.
Let me add something to that, if I could. I think Naftali's absolutely right. We're not yet using AI essentially to make unsupervised decisions to deploy the defense. I think experiments in that domain are coming. There is another aspect of this that's important, however, and that is AI is being used by companies like Amazon, by other companies, Alibaba for their City Brain project in China, coming, I assume, to a city near you, to optimize transportation resources. Securing systems that use AI is an emerging challenge. We're being asked to look at it, and we are, in part because AI systems can be conceivably fooled, the data can be poisoned. You can say, you can try to, you can try to tell the system, that's not, that's not grandma. You can go right through. That's a green light, and get the AI system to make the wrong decision. But as AI is used to mediate more complex infrastructures, including critical infrastructures, the security of AI applications and the security of the data that AI applications use to make these decisions, that's another cybersecurity challenge that's going to have to be met, and met very, very soon, because things like smart cities applications are being rolled out in real time. Alibaba has productized it, they've commoditized it, and they're taking it to market. So understanding the cybersecurity of it is one of the most important things I think we have to do.
Sam, Naftali, Gary, thank you for being a great panel. They're going to be available after.